Hello, and welcome to the Mama Making Podcast, where we share stories of moms making impact in their own lives and in the world around them. I'm Jessica, and each week I sit down with women who are building businesses, leading communities, shaping culture, and redefining what success looks like inside of motherhood. Because motherhood does not have to stop your ambition, it can transform it. Now let's get into it. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Mama Making Podcast. I'm your host, Jessica. If you're new, welcome. If you're not new, then welcome back. I am so excited to have Terry Tateossian on the podcast today. She is the founder of Thor, the House of Rose, a health coaching practice built for midlife women ready to reclaim their health and vitality. At 42, Terry lost over 80 pounds, overcame emotional eating, and discovered the strengths she didn't know she had. She started a physical transformation that became something much bigger. She now helps other women do the same. Welcome, Terry. Thanks for joining me.
Thank you, Jessica, for having me. It's an absolute pleasure to be here.
Yeah, so tell us a little bit more about you, who you are, where you're from, whatever you're comfortable sharing.
Yes, let's see, my gosh, it goes back quite a while. So I was born in Eastern Europe and I came to the US at the age of 13. I followed the American dream. I did all the things. I went to school. I got a college degree. I started working in the corporate world. And then eventually I transitioned into entrepreneurship and I did that balls to the wall, okay, from the age of 25 all the way to 37. And then in the midst of all that, of building a company, managing a company, or organizing a company, traveling all over the world, I also had my daughter at 30 and my son at 35. And by 37, I was still wearing maternity clothes. I could not lose the weight that I had gained. And I started having weird things happening to me that I was not understanding at the time. I had no idea what was going on. I'm going to be 50 this year, so I have a better perspective on what actually went down 13 years ago. And yeah, so that's where my journey really began, to reconnecting back to my body, because I, at that time, was very disconnected internally from what I should feel like, right? Like what healthy felt like. And so that's where it all started for me 13 years ago.
So 13 years ago, what did life look like? And what was that was there a final shift moment where you're like, things need to change? Or was it something gradual where you kind of worked toward it? What did it all look like in that transformation moment?
So it started with the first hospitalization. Well, let me go a little bit back. 37, I had my 2-year-old and my 7-year-old. And I knew I was overweight. I knew I had to drop weight. I knew it was creating more stress on my body. I was 210 pounds at the time. So 5'3". So about 80, a good 60 to 80 pounds over where it was comfortable to be at. And so, but I didn't have any time. So I had a business, I had my children, I had zero time. I would, get into bed and my head would hit the pillow and I was out. There was 5 minutes self-care. What? Like, no, that was not happening. 1 hour to the gym where I didn't have 5 minutes, right? I couldn't go to the bathroom without an audience at that time, right? And so there was no time. And so I just kept patching things up, just ignoring, just stuffing it under the rug, whatever, I'll deal with this later. But then one day I was reaching for my nightly pint of ice cream. So I was, eating a lot of sugar and I started having these chest pains. And immediately I thought, wow, I'm having a heart attack. Because my grandfather had a history of heart disease. He actually passed away from his 4th heart attack. So it was always kind of in my mind, like, oh, these chest pains, I'm having heart disease at 37. So I run to ER. They hung out with me there for 2 days. They did all the tests. They gave me a Xanax and they said, go home. There's nothing wrong with you. We can't find anything going on with you. You're having an anxiety attack or panic attack or whatever. And I was so embarrassed. I was like, that was a panic attack? Like, what the heck does a heart attack feel like if a panic attack was that extreme? And so, yeah, I ignored it. I just kept going on about my usual stressed out way because I thought, well, it's a fluke, whatever. I don't have time to deal with this panic thing. Like, get over it, tough it out, man up. Like, who's got time for this thing? And yeah, so it happened again a few months later. And this time I was like, oh, there is no way this is not a heart attack. I mean, whatever they ran tests on me, they got it wrong. They missed it. Okay. I had this can't be a panic attack. This has to be a heart attack. Yeah, no, I'm right to ER. Same thing happened. And then I had a nurse that was kind enough to tell me, like, you probably need to lose some weight. You're too fat, basically. It's not really good for you. Your body's feeling a lot of stress from the extra weight you're carrying around, and you're pretty active and you're pretty young. And so I thought about that more. That kind of hit a little harder than the last time. And so I did go to a cardiologist. I start the journey of trying to figure out what the heck's wrong with me. Why is this happening? Why do I feel like this? I used to have these afternoon crashes. They're probably insulin crashes from all the sugar I was binging on, because I was so disconnected, right? I was so overwhelmed, so disconnected. There's too many things to do. I didn't know where to show up at first. There was so much going on, and I was using sugar, alcohol, nicotine. I mean, you name it. I would try to get my hands on it just to calm myself down, essentially. And little by little, I started realizing that this was a lifestyle that was going to lead me to a place I was very much afraid of by the time I was 50, 60 years old. And I am now going to be 50 this year. So I'm very grateful for the 37-year-old that was terrified and actually took steps to figure out what's going on.
Yeah, and I think your story resonates so much with us women who are having young kids. We're in the trenches, raising young children, creating businesses and building businesses and growing and taking care of our homes and doing school drop off and getting everyone fed and out the door. And there's so, let alone, like you said, the self-care of it all. I have yet to find a self-care routine, but I'm in the exact space that you're talking about, and that it's like my calendar is so full and my responsibilities and task list is so full that finding an hour time frame to get to the gym or go to yoga or whatever it might be is like, that is so far from being on my list, simply because there's so many other pressing things. So I know that there's a lot of us that are in this space, whatever age we are, where it's like, how do I even start this? I know I need to do more. I know I need to do something different, but how do I even do that? Like, I'm already overwhelmed. I'm already spread thin. How do I reprioritize this? I would love to hear where you started first.
Yeah, so I realized it wasn't about doing more. I couldn't do any more. There was no more to be done. I remember like it was yesterday saying things like, I don't have any more. This is it. This is all I got. This is my maximum amount of output. This is my limit of what I can do in terms of all the things I was taking on, right? And so unfortunately, and it felt really scary at the time, because we always think that if we step back, that everything's going to fall apart, right? The business is going to fall apart. The household's going to fall apart. We over dramatize, or we create these stories in our minds that if we stop doing X, Y, Z, catastrophe is going to happen, right? We catastrophize all these things. And so I was in that space, and I thought, if I stepped away or I took time, that something terrible was going to happen. Everything was going to go in the wrong direction. And it was very, very, very difficult to try and take some space and remove things from the schedule. That's how we do more, is by doing less. And that's what I learned the hard way. It was very, very uncomfortable, especially when you're in the throes of it, right? Like your momentum is going, you've got businesses, children, households, responsibilities, you're trying to have a social life, but maybe not, I don't know, all these things. You're trying to be a good friend, you have parents, all this stuff is just funneling into your life all at the same time, and you're just in awe of how much you can handle. And then when you think you cannot handle anymore, something else comes in, right? And you're like, holy cow. You got to expand the bandwidth and try to accommodate all these things, right? And so it's and you're always thinking like, well, if I don't accommodate this, if I don't do this, horrible things are going to happen. People are not going to like me. People are not going to be friends with me. I'm not going to have any friends. My family's going to be mad at me. My family expects all these things, right? My children, all this stuff, right? And it's very uncomfortable to say no and to say, I cannot attend this event or I cannot help you, right? Because I'm drowning. And then, you have to be vulnerable and tell people like, hey, I'm struggling a lot and I don't know if I have the bandwidth to help you, right? It's very difficult to do that, especially when you're, a go-getter. You're used to being the one everybody comes to. You're used to lending a helping hand. You want to help people, right? But when the situation arises where, in my case, I had entered perimenopause on top of all that, right? So I didn't know it. I had early onset perimenopause at 37. And so all the SHIT was hitting the fan all at the same time, right? And so I had to really, really humble myself to stop a lot of things. And that included work for me. I had to step back from handling a lot of things. I had to take a break. I had to really reevaluate my social obligations, my work obligations. I had to really kind of find that quiet space to be able to hear my own body and what it was looking for, what it was needing. And that was not possible when you're on the go.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think as women, we can do so much and we're very adaptable and able to make room at the table when we need to. But I think what you're talking about is burnout and kind of self-sabotage, and that we aren't taking off things from our plate that we maybe should in benefit of ourselves. And I think that can be really hard to identify as women. Like, as it's happening, we're not noticing until it's like, oh, I've hit a point that's scary, like a health situation or something that we have hit a pivotal moment that's like, okay, things have to change. But figuring out what those things need to change, like what needs to change to start to move towards wellness, I guess I'll use in what a lot of people call balance. I don't know that I totally believe in balance, but I think it's intimidating to come up against all of these spinning plates that you have and then to try to decide which ones are worth letting spin and which ones need to crash down. What are some of the things for you, as at the time you were a mom, business owner, what were some of the things that you had to prioritize right off the bat to start moving into this transition?
I had to find a way to get the weight off. So that was creating a physical almost illness in my body. It was too heavy. I couldn't go up the stairs. I couldn't, I'd walk a mile and I'd be out of breath and I'd be exhausted, right? Just a lot of things. I just didn't feel well. My insulin was probably not in the right space. I was eating a lot of sugar. I had to find a way to change my eating habits and stop using sugar and alcohol as a way to regulate my nervous system, which at the time I didn't know that's what I was doing, but that is what I was doing. I was so dysregulated that I just needed anything, right? And so that anything could have been something more healthy. It could have been a very short walk outside. It could have been while talking on the phone, doing work or whatever. You could multitask, right? I needed to begin strength training because for my body, that was medicine. That helped me feel so much better. It reduced anxiety. It reduced all of these like feelings of doom constantly that I had, right? The catastrophizing thing, like everything's going to fall apart if I take 30 minutes to work out. That's what my mind was telling me. And so I had to overcome all those things. And I really needed movement in my life. And I think we all do, because I was at a desk job 24/7. I was working on the computer, and taking care of my kids at the same time. And so, yeah, that was a priority, is trying to get the weight off of me. And this was 13 years ago. So 13 years ago, I had to do it the old school retro way, which now when I talk about that, people are like, what? Like, you didn't do GLP? Like, they didn't have GLP back then. GLP was not a thing 13 years ago. They were not using it for weight loss. That was an insulin, it was a diabetic drug, and that was not an option. You know, back in the day, for me, we had fen as an option. We had, what the heck was it called? Xenadrin, I think it was, like the appetite suppressant back in the day. We had, these appetite suppressing teas and all these detox, scams out there. There was no GLP. We barely had HRT. People were barely talking about HRT 13 years ago, right? And so now it's almost like unheard of that you lose weight the retro, old fashioned, old school way. And I had to do that. And I had to go through all of the steps required in order to not only lose the weight, but also to maintain the weight loss for 13 years. And that required a complete identity shift, a complete healing with my eating habits, right? I had to heal my relationship with food. I had to heal my relationship with myself so that I could allow myself to feel good, right? Because there's that part of us and some of us that doesn't allow that. Like, you're not entitled to feel good in your own body for whatever reason, right? Because of trauma, because of past experiences, current experience, the present moment, whatever it may be, right? There's all of these different old limiting beliefs that live in our own minds that keep us stuck in these places where we're miserable. And I was miserable. I was I'm not going to lie about it. I was not happy to be 210 pounds. And I probably never will be ever happy to be 210, no matter how much I can spin it around and say, oh, whatever. No, I was very miserable being that overweight.
Going from like being all in on business and work and making this mindset shift, what were some of the more sustainable routines that you created for yourself to make sure that this stayed? It wasn't just a month long or 2 month long activity you were doing. You had to make this sustainable for your business, for your family as a long term. What did that look like for you?
Yeah, so time blocking, right? So in the morning, I had to time block it. It had to become a non-negotiable, and it had to be part of what brought me into peak performance for work. So if I spun it around that way, it was a little bit more allowed, in my own head, that I should spend this time doing something that gives me a return on my investment, right? So you're looking at a little bit more business terms, like, okay, it can't be a waste of time and you can't have no return on this time investment. And so I had to find a way to spin it and pivot and say, well, if I feel better, I'm going to have more energy. That means I can be more efficient with my kids and with work. I could be in a better mood. I can show up for both family and business in a much more positive way. And I can contribute more if I feel better physically in terms of health. And also if I felt better about my appearance, right? So let's not, kid around. It matters. We care what we look like. Right. I did. I cared. I just convinced myself at some point that I didn't and that nobody cared. And, I wasn't entitled to feel good, look good because nobody cared. Right. And so that was a lie. That wasn't true because I cared. And yeah, so I had to spin it around and give myself 2 hours in the morning to get it done no matter what. And some mornings I would cry. Some mornings it wasn't a full 2 hours, right? So maybe like something like 7 to 9 a.m. or 6 to 8 a.m. I would find that window. Sometimes it was 5 to 7 p.m., right? Or sometimes it was during lunch or whatever it was, but I had to find that 2 hour block where, it took account any travel time at the gym, whatever was necessary. And I followed it religiously. Some days, obviously, I had to shift things around, but I would show up. And, there were periods of time where I would fall off the wagon. I would just quit on myself for a few weeks. And thankfully, I had gotten smarter and wiser by then. And I had hired a coach, and she would slap me around, be like, "Where are you? What the heck's going on? Where, you haven't done a workout in a week," or whatever it is. And that would kind of bring me back to reality that, oh, shoot, what happened? Right. And bring more awareness and really have somebody to hold me accountable. I had somebody to hold me responsible for what I promised, not to her, but to me. And to remind me that you're doing this for yourself, right? You want this. You said you wanted this, and now you've checked out. So let's unpack why. Why did you check out? Has your goal changed? Do you no longer want this? And if you do still want it, well, get your ass back into whatever you were doing. And it doesn't have to be going to the gym. You can do these things right next to your computer, right next to your desk. You just need a dumbbell and a resistance band, or a few resistance bands. So there's literally no excuse. You can be, on a phone call, or you could be reading something, and you could be walking on a walking pad right in your office. So there's so many ways to multitask where you still get that movement in your day and still be productive in other areas or whatever it is. You could be walking on your walking pad while your baby's sleeping in the bouncy chair, for example. Lots of ways to make it happen if that is your priority right now. No, there are times in life when it cannot be a priority. And I've been there. I totally get it. So yeah.
So obviously this made huge transformation in your day-to-day life. How did it change your business? How did work look like for you? How did it transform the way that you showed up for work, built your business? How did that all go?
So there are two answers to this question, right? So it depends on what stage is your business at. So let's say your business has employees, right? You have employees, you've hired people, whether they're contractors, advisors, U2 employees, whichever, and you are paying them to do certain things. Now, I apparently was in a position where I did that, but then I also had to do a lot of the work that was supposed to be getting done by the people that were there. And so, or it wasn't being done correctly, or something I didn't like about it, or my systems maybe were not right. I don't know. Lots of reasons, right? And so a lot of it was management was taking up a lot of my time. So I not only had to do my job, but I had to do other people's job. And then you have the whole dynamic of a business, right? So when you lose an employee or somebody quits unexpectedly, you have to hire somebody else, train them. But then what happens in that gap between when somebody quits and by the time you onboard somebody new? Who does the work in between, right? It's usually the business owner. So there's a lot that goes on. When you own a business, you are basically doing the job of 5 people. And that's the choice you've made to have a business, and that could take its toll. So depending on what stage your business is at, you either hire people that are better at their jobs, or maybe they are, probably going to be more expensive, but you look for ways to bridge that gap. Maybe another thing to look at is, well, is all the work I'm taking in profitable, right? Is there work that I'm doing that does not deliver any type of return on this investment of having an employee or doing it myself or whatever it is? Is it actually profitable? Is it worth doing it? Do I need all these employees? Right. And then do I have the capacity to do the jobs of 5 people every single day? If something doesn't go right. And so, looking at those two things, if you have a business that has employees, if you have a business, if you're a solopreneur and it's you and maybe one other person, or it's just you, then the question is the work profitable, or does it require you to work 24 hours a day? Because that's not sustainable. That's not going to work out. you're not going to end up in a good place. And so, are you working with the right clients that allow you? You're still going to work hard. I mean, don't get me wrong, you still work pretty hard, but does the type of clients you're taking on allow you to take care of yourself and show up fully for them because you got some sleep? Okay. There were nights I never didn't sleep. I pulled all nighters. Um, it allows you to be in good physical, mental, and emotional state when you show up for them, right? Or are they draining? And if that is the case, then one of the hardest things to do is to let go of the clients. You fire the clients. So in both situations, from my perspective, what I learned is I either had to let go of clients or I had to let go of people in the company, or I was going to have to let myself go. See what I'm saying?
Yeah. Yeah. And it's crazy to see how big of a transformation like your regular life makes, but then also all the changes that you're making, the 2 hours that you block out gives you the time to think through some of these decisions with a clear mind and be able to evaluate things without having that panic of making a decision. So obviously it's going to help your day to day. You feel better, you look better, but on the business side, it helps you think a lot more clearly. You're making less decisions out of stress or fear or whatever it might be. It's so interesting to see how they connect.
Yeah, I made a lot of decisions out of fear, fear that, we weren't going to make the client happy, or fear that the client was going to, fire us, or whatever it may be, fear that, employees were going to leave, and then what were we going to do? Who's going to cover the workload? Lots of fear. Okay. And I totally get it. And that is, in my experience, the majority of business owners are living in that place, right? You have to juggle all these different things, and then add being a female, and add having children at the same time, who are your biggest clients. They're the boss. Okay. I mean, everybody listening out there, I know you guys know what I'm talking about. They are the boss. They're the big boss. And when the kids need you, you got to drop everything and go. And yeah, I always used to joke around. My daughter basically grew up in the office. My daughter grew up going to meetings, going to conferences, going to the office. That's where everybody came after school. My son, too, when he was old enough, I would hold her in the crook of my arm, both of them, and, feed them with the baby bottle pressed up against my chin, and my other hand was either on the computer or I was talking on the phone. I mean, they just grew up in this environment, but they were the boss, right? And so if I didn't have the room or the flexibility to address the big boss, I had a problem.
Yeah. And I think at the end of the day, like that's why most of us get into entrepreneurship. I'm sure that there's a million reasons that we could all list of why we've decided to do it. But I think at the end of the day, the flexibility and autonomy to be able to answer to that boss in a way that makes sense and provides less stress, I think is why we all do it anyway. So I love that analogy. I'd love to talk a little bit more about this idea of being midlife, what it is to you, what it looks like to you, what impact it has had on you. I know you were saying that you were in early perimenopause when this all kind of kicked off. What did you learn during that time phase or time life
Frame.
phase? Yeah. In that life phase about being a midlife woman in business.
Oh my gosh, such a good question. So my perimenopause experience was the fast and the furious. It was between 37 and 42. So at
Wow.
42, I had a 7-year-old. I had him at I had my daughter at 30 and I had my son at 35. 7, I had a 2-year-old. I entered perimenopause unbeknownst to me. 2 is when I realized I was fully menopausal. So here's what happened, okay? This is how clueless I was. I thought I was pregnant. So my period didn't show up for 3 months. And then I was like, that's kind of weird. I didn't have time to go to the doctor. And so then it kept going. And then it was like 6 months and then still no period. I was like, I thought I was pregnant. And then it just, time went on and then the period never showed up. And then I was 43, 42, 43. And I joke around now because I'm like, that's how I found out I was in menopause, is when I thought I was pregnant. again. And it was a rough ride, okay? It was the Fast and the Furious. And again, this was old school. So I'm going to bring you guys back to that time when HRT was not in the media, when nobody talked about perimenopause. I didn't even know what the heck menopause was. I mean, I knew at some point, you don't get your period anymore, but I thought it was in your 60s that happened. And so the idea of being in menopause while I was still running around in maternity clothes was so far away from my mind that it didn't dawn on me until it actually happened. But then I look back and I realized, wow, all these things where I thought I was losing my mind. I was having panic attacks. I had these intense mood swings up and down, up and down. I would go through periods of anxiety and then boom into depression. And then my moods would be so volatile. Like one day I would be like, this is amazing. I'm going to go build another business. And then the next day it was like, no, we're not doing anything. We're dumping it all. I was just all over the place, right? One day I would feel really good and then I would like you. And then the next day I would be like, I don't like this person. It was intense. Okay. It was very intense. And it feels like internally, like you're losing your shit basically. And you don't know why. Because at that time, they didn't really test hormones at, you know, 40 years old. So when I did go to the doctor and explain things, they're like, here's the Xanax. You're just having anxiety or whatever. Nobody ever said perimenopause. Nobody said, hey, let's check your hormone panel. I didn't hear that until probably like, I don't know, like a year ago, maybe 2 years ago, it became a common thing that you'd go to the doctor and they would test your hormones. And you still have to ask for it, by the way.
Right.
It's not
Right.
automatic. Okay. So I didn't know any of these things. I was just fumbling around blindly. And then finally, it occurred to me like, oh, okay, that's what was going on. I wasn't actually going nuts. This was a physical thing that was happening to me. And another funny story. So I got lucky. I started weight training at the same time as I was going through perimenopause. And I would go to the gym, I'd work out really hard. I'd go about my day, do whatever I had to do. And then I'd be laying in bed and I would get these heat flashes. Didn't know that was a hot flash. And so my whole body would just burn, right? Like it would be like on fire. It would be from my top of my head all the way down to my toes. I would break out into these sweats and I would get so happy. I would text my coach and say, my gosh, this is so amazing. I'm burning fat just from laying in bed after my workouts. Yes, I was that clueless. Can you believe that, Jessica?
Well, I think we have this idea of what perimenopause and menopause is, and I think that time frame we picture to be so much later in our life. I like you said, I'm not shocked to hear that you thought you were pregnant. I mean, I feel like you were still in those postpartum years where like your body doesn't go back to normal till like 3 years after you have a baby. So I feel like that has to be more common than we hear about, that there's women who go through that early phase way earlier than expected. And like I think we go for so long knowing our bodies really well and understanding ourselves, and then you get to this point where you're like, wait a second, what is happening? Who am I? And when you were talking about it, I distinctly remember my mom talking about when she went through menopause that she felt like she was going crazy, that she had like raging anxiety about nothing. And all she was, like you said, all she was handed was a Xanax, take it as needed. And she was sent on her way. And so I think that has just been so common for so long that I'm not surprised that you were like rationalizing what was happening.
Yes, rationalizing it. Don't do that. Don't rationalize it. Don't explain it to yourself because, you don't know what you don't know. And I made that mistake. It's because I would rationalize it instead of going out and seeking answers and not taking here's a Xanax as the answer, but actually finding people that maybe experience something similar, or a community where maybe somebody can give you guidance and say, hey, go see this doctor, or just ask questions. Don't be embarrassed about it, because I mean, geez, the stories I have of and they're really funny to me now, but they were not funny while they were happening, because I
Yeah.
didn't understand what was going on. Yeah. And the best way I can describe it is, you're on a plane and you just, so once in a while there's some turbulence in life, right? But then when you hit this perimenopause thing, the turbulence is really intense. It's like everything is just going nuts. And you're like, whoa, like you don't know what's going on. And then the best way I can describe how I feel right now is we're in smooth air right now. Once you come out of that place of extreme turbulence, confusion, not understanding your own body, not recognizing yourself, thinking you're going crazy, all this stuff is changing. If you take the right approach and you remove unnecessary stress from your life, you reprioritize the things that will give you the highest return on your investment of time, such as your nutrition, your alcohol intake, your sleep pattern, your stress level, your community, and very importantly, your strength training, you can come out of that zone feeling better than you did before you entered, because the majority of us will go through perimenopause, right? So I have talked to women that even have a hysterectomy that still have experienced kind of like phantom perimenopause symptoms. And you just never know. You don't know how your body's going to react, right? And so even if your mom did not have the fast and the furious perimenopause, you could, right? Because your life could have been very different from hers. You could have had more stress in life, or you could have had less stress in life. Maybe if your mom did go through the fast and furious menopause, maybe you won't. So you never know in which direction it's going to go. So in my opinion, it's best to be prepared for either way, right? Some people's perimenopause lasts 5 years, some people last 2 years, some people last 20 years, right? You can enter perimenopause and still at 40 and still be in it by 60. I've heard that as well. I've talked to a lot of different women at the Thor retreats. I've talked to a lot of women that I coach. Everybody's very, very different. And you can't take somebody else's experience and apply it to your own life, because they come from a different background, different genetics, different environment, different lifestyle, different stress level, all of that. But these things that I mentioned, they work for everybody. So there's no downside to bringing some aspects of these things into your life so that you can at least give yourself a little bit of a chance to not experience it as roughly, although you still might, right? So that turbulent period, you may still experience it no matter what you do, and that's not your fault. But then at least afterwards, you can come out of it in a little bit of a better sense of being.
Yeah, I love that. I think that's the perfect place to talk a little bit more about Thor and the Thor retreats. Tell us everything, what it is, what you guys do.
As I was so inspired by my own madness of my experience. And then I started talking to a lot of other women, and everybody was having the same experience. And then I went through, very similar experiences with the system and how it all works. And then I saw how nutrition, strength training, sleep, substance abuse, stress, community, having connections to other people, being able to share things openly with no shame, embarrassment, etc., how that transformed women and it transformed me. And so I started doing retreats for women in the Smoky Mountains. You can find me at thehouseofrose.com. You can also find me on Instagram. How good can it get? They're mostly women's retreats, and they're not necessarily focused on menopause or perimenopause, but they are focused on nervous system regulation, nutrition, strength training, hiking, just finding space and time for ourselves for just a little bit out of this busy life that we live, and going home and applying those modalities, or applying some of those things like breath work and restorative yoga and things like that back into our routine if they helped. And so that's what I do now. That is my passion. That is my purpose. That is my love project.
Oh, I love that. I love being able to go and be in community with people. I think that that makes a huge difference. We're in such a virtual world, and being able to be in person and really connect and vibe with each other in person, I think makes a world of difference. Then you're also a little bit more accountable to those people as well who you made those connections and probably commitments with. And I love that they have some practical ways to go home and really implement all the work that they did in their own lives.
100%.
So tell us where people can find you, social media, website, wherever you'd like to share.
Yeah, so you can find me on thehouseofrose.com, and then you can find me on Instagram, How Good Can It Get? Or you can just search Terry Tateossian, and I'm sure you'll find something pop up. But yeah, reach out anytime anyone has any questions or wants to connect. I am here. I'm open.
Thank you so much. This has been so great to hear from you about your story and kind of how it all unfolded. I appreciate your time. Thanks for being here.
Thank you for having me, Jessica. It was my pleasure.
If this conversation resonated with you, I'd love for you to follow the podcast wherever you listen and share it with another mom building something meaningful. If you want deeper behind the scenes reflections that I don't share anywhere else, join my email list at themamamakingpodcast.com. Thank you for being here, and I'll see you next time.